Realism has become one of the most influential design philosophies in modern video games, shaping not only how virtual worlds look but also how they function, how their characters behave, and how players experience their stories. Realism is more than high-resolution textures or lifelike animations. It encompasses the simulation of believable worlds, coherent systems, and human behavior. Two contemporary games that we're going to discuss today are Come Deliverance 2 and Red Dead Redemption 2. These two are seen as some of the most ambitious attempts to create immersive, realistic game environments. Although these two games differ radically in setting, tone, and even mechanics, both rely on realism as a tool to deepen immersion, reinforce narrative authenticity, and offer players a world that feels meaningfully alive. Examining the methods each game uses and the compromises they make reveals both the power and the limitations of realism in modern video game design. KCD2, or Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, developed by Warhorse Studios, continues the franchise's dedication to historical authenticity and grounded medieval role-playing. Unlike most RPGs that integrate fantasy elements or simplified mechanics, KCD2 leans heavily into realism, depicting the social structures, combat, daily life, and physical challenges of 15th century Bohemia with meticulous care. The realism shapes nearly every part of the game, from how the world functions to how the player experiences combat and character progression. While this design philosophy provides deep immersion, it also introduces challenges that can be polarizing to other players. One of KCD2's most celebrated achievements is its historically grounded world. Towns, villages, and fortifications, they're all built with attention to period-accurate architecture and social structure. NPCs follow believable daily routines, working, eating, sleeping, and interacting with one another in ways that make the world feel alive rather than a static world. The environmental realism goes beyond visuals. Weather affects visibility and travel, nightfall closes shops and alters NPCs' behaviors, and the passage of time has meaningful consequences. This living world helps players feel like participants in actual medieval society, and not merely adventurers moving through a video game environment. By anchoring the player in a world that reacts to schedules, laws, and social norms, KCD2 delivers a sense of authenticity uncommon in modern open-world games. KCD2 reinforces realism through various survival systems. Hunger, fatigue, and the need for sleep all affect players' abilities. Ignoring food reduces stamina and combat effectiveness. Lack of sleep impairs performance and can even alter dialogue outcomes. And cleanliness matters as well. NPCs will react differently if Henry is dirty or unkempt or covered in blood. These mechanics reflect a world where survival is not abstracted into background numbers, but is woven into everyday life. It gets to the point where shopkeepers will even raise their prices or outright not sell to you if you smell too bad or are covered in blood from a previous battle. This aspect of the game to some could be considered relatively annoying, but there is nothing more real than an aspect like this. NPCs will even make comments as you pass by them according to how you look, or smell, or are dressed, something most games would not dare to test out, but with KCD2 and Warhorse in general, they thrive on this type of gameplay. Equipment also reflects historical reality. Swords dull with use, armor degrades after combat, and clothing gets dirty or torn. Maintenance, whether sharpening a blade or repairing a piece of armor, it is essential to keep them at their peak for the highest damage or highest protection. These systems force players to plan, manage their resources, and treat their equipment as tools that require care, not items with infinite durability. Combat in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is intentionally slow, it is tactical, it is demanding instead of a fast-paced hack-and-slash action as normal games, or I guess a lot of games nowadays are. The game uses a directional system where attacks, blocks, and feints are all required, and the timing is imperative to master. Stamina also plays a central role. Swinging wildly will exhaust Henry, leaving him vulnerable to counterattacks. This creates a rhythm that mirrors real combat more closely than most RPG systems that we see in place for video games nowadays. On the back of this, weapons, they feel weighty, and the type of armor worn by opponents determines the effectiveness of certain attacks. Blunt weapons may excel against plate armor, while blades are more effective against light armored foes. Archery lacks aim assist and requires practice. Firearms, which are still very primitive for this time period, are powerful but very slow, very loud, and very unreliable, reflecting the early technological state. Mounted combat adds another realistic dimension, demanding spatial awareness and careful maneuvering. As a whole, KCD2's combat system provides authenticity over accessibility, rewarding patience, skill, and tactical thinking. Social systems in KCD2 are equally grounded. Like another game we will discuss in a bit, reputation does matter, although crime is handled a little differently. Crime is punished realistically. Stealing, trespassing, or assaulting civilians carries consequences that affect how NPCs treat Henry. Guards enforce local laws, and committing offenses can lead to fines, imprisonment, or combat if the player resists. Even social interactions in everyday life reflect realism. Dialogue outcomes can depend on clothing quality, cleanliness, charisma, or recent behavior. Completing quests too slowly can lead to missed opportunities because NPCs follow their own schedules and priorities. This reinforces the idea that the world does not revolve around the player, but the player simply is inside of the world. Henry must adapt to the world's rhythms and consequences. This is such a cool concept to have included in a game, to have the ludonarrative dissonance be this intense that you can literally just miss a quest entirely if you take too long. This makes the game feel so real, and it makes you feel like you're just another guy living in the world and not the central point of it. If you do miss the quest for a given NPC, the next time you talk to them will be an unpleasant time, as you essentially ignored the NPC in their mind, blowing them off to do something else. This will not only affect dialogue, but the overall demeanor of the NPC and how they treat you throughout the game. Crafting and maintenance systems in KCD2 prioritize player involvement. Tasks like sharpening weapons, brewing potions, and repairing armor are not simple menu selections. They involve physical animations and steps. This design choice enhances immersion and reinforces the labor and effort required for medieval craftsmanship. Animations throughout the game, like riding horses, swinging weapons, reacting to wounds, are crafted to convey weight, exhaustion, and vulnerability. These details help players connect physically and emotionally with Henry and his journey, grounding the experience in a sense of bodily realism. In the end, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 stands as one of the most ambitious and uncompromising attempts to portray medieval life in video games. Its systems work not in isolation, but in careful, deliberate harmony. The exacting combat, the demanding survival mechanics, the attention to social norms, and the weight of law and consequences, along with the detailed world building and the commitment to historical accuracy, are all intertwined to form a remarkably cohesive experience. What makes the game truly distinctive is its refusal to simplify or glamorize the past. Instead, it embraces the harshness, the labor, the danger, and the fragility of life in 15th century Bohemia. By doing so, it offers players not a fantasy of power, but a story of growth, of resilience, and human vulnerability. Every challenge Henry faces, whether repairing a dulled sword, or navigating a tense battle, working through exhaustion, or contending with the consequences of his own mistakes, reinforce the idea that survival itself is an accomplishment. At the same time, the game's dedication to realism inevitably sort of becomes a double-edged sword. For many players, the steep learning curve, the slow progression, and the constant need to manage basic human needs may lead to frustration. These mechanics demand patience, attention, and strategy, which can be exhilarating for those who are seeking the depth, but intimidating for those used to more forgiving RPGs. Technical limitations, occasional inconsistencies, and sheer complexity of interlocking systems can create friction. Yet these shortcomings reflect the risk inherent in pursuing authenticity and in aiming to simulate a world rather than merely present one. Rockstar Games' Red Dead Redemption 2 is widely considered one of the most immersive and meticulously crafted open-world experiences in modern gaming. Set in 1899 during the twilight of the American frontier, it presents not only a sweeping narrative about the decline of outlaw life, but also an unprecedented commitment to environmental, physical, and behavioral realism. Unlike many action-adventure titles that prioritize fast-paced gameplay or stylized systems, RDR2 anchors its mechanics in the textures, burdens, and slow rhythms of real life in the late 19th century. This realism shapes everything from the way players care for their horses and their weapons to how NPCs behave, or how the world shifts with the weather and how the story unfolds through grounded character interactions. While this approach creates a remarkably immersive experience, it also introduces the trade-offs and pacing challenges inherent to striving for authenticity. One of RDR2's most defining achievements is its living, breathing world. The game environments include sprawling plains, dense forests, bustling towns, industrializing cities, and desolate mountains. They are crafted with extraordinary attention to detail. Weather is dynamic and meaningful. Storms roll in with wind that affects visibility and movement, snow accumulates realistically, and mud clings to Arthur's boots and clothing. Temperature matters too. Arthur must dress appropriately for cold or for heat, or suffer stat penalties reinforcing the physical reality of the setting. Arthur can't just head up to the highest and snowiest mountain in jeans and a button-up with the collar open and the sleeves rolled up. And inversely, Arthur can't go to Rhodes in a wool winter coat and bearskin chaps without suffering from the heat that the area brings. Animals behave realistically as well. Predators stalk prey, birds scatter when startled, and horses react to wildlife and gunfire. If a snake or a cougar appear, your horse will straight up buck you off because it is so terrified. Rivers flow with believable physics affecting swimming, fishing, and traversal. And at night, the world adopts a completely different tone. Fewer people travel, animals behave differently, and towns quiet down or grow rowdy depending on their culture and economy. RDR's 2 does not simply look real. It behaves and evolves like a living ecosystem, granting players a sense of participating in a genuine historical environment. RDR2's NPCs are some of the most convincingly human characters in any open world game. Townsfolk rise in the morning, work throughout the day, visit saloons, attend church services, and take part in social events, and eventually settle down for the night. Conversations overheard between townspeople convey local gossip, personal conflicts, political concerns, and reactions to players' actions. The game's honor system further enhances social realism. NPCs remember Arthur's behavior, whether he helps strangers, commits crimes, or simply presents himself well. Witnesses will report crimes, sheriffs and bounty hunters pursue offenders, and civilians react with fear, anger, or gratitude depending on the situation. Just like KCD, Arthur's level of cleanliness influences interactions. If he is covered in mud or blood, people may insult him or keep their distance. A member of your camp may even bring up how poor you look or how dirty you are and force you to wash yourself.
You're filthy again, Mr. Morgan.
Not now.
You should be ashamed of yourself. A grown man covered in shit like this. No.
Y-
Okay. Let's go.
Here. Some money for your trouble.
Well, thank you kindly.
The social simulation creates a world that responds meaningfully to the player, one where actions have moral weight and societal consequences, reinforcing the authenticity of Arthur's role within a complex and changing America. RDR2 incorporates numerous survival mechanics that contribute to its grounded experience. Arthur must eat, rest, and maintain his health, stamina, and deadeye cores. Food quality, frequency of meals, and rest all influence the performance. Weight also matters. Overeating makes Arthur heavy, improving defense but reducing stamina. Conversely, undereating has the opposite effect. Although not imperative like in KCD2, RDR2 gives you boosts to your cores after a home-cooked meal, or a nice hot bath, leading you to want to do it more, to receive those oh-so-important boosts to your health, stamina, and so on. Clothing serves not just aesthetic purposes, but practical ones. In cold environments, inadequate clothing penalizes Arthur's stats, while heavy garments cause overheating in the desert. This encourages players to think like a real traveler, adjusting attire based on weather and regional climates. Arthur's body accumulates dirt, blood, and sweat during the travel and combat. To stay clean, he must bathe or swim. Beards grow over time and require shaving. Weapon recoil, injury animations, limping after being wounded, and realistic handling of firearms further strengthen the sense that Arthur is a human being in a physically demanding environment. Even looting bodies takes time, making each action feel deliberate rather than gamified. Each cupboard or cabinet or dresser Arthur may search through is opened one door at a time, and the item insides are picked up one at a time. RDR2 is telling you this game is taken realistically, and they will go to even the smallest details to get that point across. These elements slow down the pace intentionally, anchoring the experience in the day-to-day struggle of outlaw life. Combat in RDR2 is not stylized or exaggerated. It is gritty, lethal, and grounded in late 19th century weapon behavior. Guns need to be cleaned regularly to maintain accuracy, damage, and reliability. Reloading is slow and deliberate, reflecting period-appropriate firearms. Recoil varies based on weapon type, condition, and Arthur's posture. Bullet impacts have weight, pushing enemies realistically according to the caliber and momentum. Injuries behave physically as well. Enemies and animals collapse in natural ways, influenced by shot placement and force. Horses panic during gunfights, bucking riders off or fleeing from danger. And melee combat is heavy and brutal, reflecting actual bodily struggle rather than choreographed action. The game's Deadeye mechanic, while a gameplay enhancement, still emphasizes precision, timing, and situational awareness. Combined with the lethality of firearms, combat feels dangerous and consequential, aligning with the grounded themes of the game's narrative. One red flag in the realism of this game is how Arthur and all of the enemies he faces are sometimes glorified bullet sponges, taking multiple bullets to the body to be put down. Although this is not the most realistic of all the features in the game, we can sort of understand how you may have to gamify the combat to make it a little bit more user-friendly and fun to play, while also keeping it grounded enough that the players can sort of excuse it. There is so much realism in the game that even bonding with your horse is something that is natural and progressive and doesn't just happen overnight. The longer you have the horse, the more he listens. The more you feed them or you brush them, the more that they like you, and the bonding will grow. The higher bond you are with your horse leads to a lot of positives, just like calling your horse or whistling for your horse is sort of set at horse bonding 1. Every single time you upgrade to another level of horse bonding, you can call them from farther and farther away. This makes it not only feel real, but also makes horse bonding not feel like a useless mechanic, but gives you actual incentive for bonding with it and keeping the same one. Seeing all these realistic elements placed into this game, it really hits you when you are trying to make a camp out in the open world, and instead of watching Arthur take the campsite materials off the back of his horse and pitch a tent and build a fire, we cut to black and come to find out it has already been done for us. And on top of that, you don't even get to put down a tent where you want to. Rockstar then teleports you to a random location that they deem to be worthy enough to set up a campsite. RDR2 also does not seem to know that rain will put out a fire, because when it's raining, your fire is still roaring away without a flicker of it even going out. It's small inconsistencies like these that tend to break immersion in games that prioritize hyperrealism, and it almost feels counterintuitive to have me clean my gun and feed my horse and pick up every single item one by one, but I can't choose where I get to put down my campsite or even build my campsite for myself. I can understand gamifying certain features like how many bullets you can take before dying. It would not be fun to get shot once and have to restart at your last checkpoint all because there was one enemy that caught you off guard. But what I don't understand is how certain bits of realism take priority over others. When you put this much time and effort into a game to make it the most realistic world ever created, why skimp out on building your own campsite or teleporting you to a convenient location that Rockstar wants you to camp at? When making this game and creating the most beautiful open world, they had to have known that players would love to set their campsites up on a mountain overlooking the stunning world below, but unfortunately, they did not give us that option. I feel as if realism in video games, to an extent, should either be all the way in or not in at all. Like I said, gamifying certain features for consumer enjoyment is not the problem. But when creating the single most alive world in a video game, small inconsistencies like these tend to throw the players off and make me think they were too lazy to add this part in, which is understandable but quite unfortunate. One great way that a certain game can show realism is combat or health realism. Most games you are a bullet sponge. You are a tank walking through the world with so much health that you don't even really think about the fact that you could die, which is fine depending on the genre that you find yourself in. You know, sometimes it makes more sense to have a lot of health as to not take away from the overall narrative that's being told in front of you. But the way that Ghost of Tsushima does health and combat realism while also keeping the focus on the narrative is some of the best I've seen in modern day video games. Playing on normal difficulty will result in you and the Mongols taking multiple hits to be taken down. 3 or 4 shots with a bow and arrow, or 5 swipes with a katana to move on to the next, which in no way is a bad thing to have to deal with, especially if you do not want to deal with the tough combat of the games and would prefer to have more of a story-based game. But if you strive for realism in gaming, lethal is your cup of tea. The way lethal difficulty works is having enemies in the game be able to kill you in one shot, and inversely, you kill them in one shot. Just like in real life, if you were sliced across the neck or gut with a fucking katana, you would bleed out and die. And that's what this game presents, a realistic sword-based combat system that forces you to learn how your sword works and how the enemies like to attack or die trying. It's cruel, it's brutal, and it's incredibly fun to learn. And it is as real as combat gets in gaming. While realism has become one of the most celebrated design philosophies in gaming, it is not without its drawbacks. At times, realistic mechanics can impose friction that risks overwhelming or frustrating players rather than immersing them. Systems such as stamina drain, weapon degradation, or slow, animation-locked interactions may mirror real life, but they can also interrupt pacing and make moment-to-moment gameplay feel tedious. Games like KCD2 and RDR2 illustrate the tension clearly. The very features that deepen authenticity, demanding survival systems, slow travel, strict social consequences, and meticulous item management, can alienate players who prefer streamlined progression or more immediate power fantasies. Even small inconsistencies such as RDR2's inability to freely build a campsite despite its otherwise obsessive attention to physical detail highlight how realism can become a double-edged sword, drawing attention to what isn't simulated rather than what is. These moments expose realism's primary limitation. When it's implemented unevenly or when it prioritizes accuracy over enjoyment, it can break immersion instead of strengthening it. Yet despite these challenges, realism remains one of the most powerful tools in shaping meaningful game worlds. When executed thoughtfully, realism enhances narrative weight, strengthens emotional investment, and transforms virtual spaces into living ecosystems rather than just a mere backdrop. The daily routines of NPCs, the physical strains of travel, the consequences of poor decisions, and the need to care for equipment or animals all reinforce the sense that the players exist within a functioning society rather than outside of it. Realism can heighten tension during combat, deepen respect for the game's world, and foster a connection to characters that feels earned rather than imposed. In both KCD2 and RDR2 and a little bit of Ghost of Tsushima, realism ultimately serves as a vehicle for immersion, grounding their stories in vulnerability, consequences, and lived experiences. Even with its inherent compromises, realism remains a design choice that, when balanced effectively, elevates world building and narrative authenticity in ways few other approaches can ever achieve. So with that being said, realism in video games, when done so well, so excruciatingly real, it is perfect. RDR2, KCD2, Ghost of Tsushima's lethal difficulty combat. There's nothing better than that type of realism. Thank you for watching.